Hello, everybody, and welcome to your channel, Un Contención Creativo. My name is Tahi. I greet you from Costa Rica. Today's episode is going to be in English, so everybody who's a Spanish speaker, please feel free to activate your Spanish subtitles, which are going to be available. You just need to push the double C option just beneath this video. And it's going to be in English because we have a very special guest today who also happens to be a very close friend of mine, and he's from the other side of the world. So, Emir, thank you very much for joining and welcome to this channel.
Thank you very much, Kari. I'm very pleased to be here as well.
Thank you for that. So, yeah, I know that you have an interesting information you want to share with us, and it might be quite useful for Costa Rican football fans, and not only Costa Rican football fans, but also Central American countries, right?
Yes, that is correct. There's a special topic in mind here. It is mainly related to, we can call it smaller football nations in a global context and see how they are actually set up and what results have they been gaining due to their own league structure or the philosophies that they have in their respective football leagues. So that is the topic, and very much related to Costa Rica as well, because, well, we'll get into that when sharing the slides here on the next steps and take you through it in more detail. So this is basically the chart that I want to go through, and this is statistics from Football Observatory, which is basically showing the average age per league on the pitch. So this is the starting 11s. It's very important to mention that, the starting 11s. So these are the football leagues in all order. And as you can see, I've zoomed in on three countries in particular, Costa Rica, Finland, and Slovenia, because they are each other's kind of opposites in this context. So we have Costa Rica topping almost top five here when it comes to fielding the oldest lineups in world football, and Slovenia and Finland, which are small nations comparable to Costa Rica, who are fielding the youngest lineups in world football. So we will look into that in more detail and see what respective results that actually gives these countries. That being said, if you understand this slide, we proceed and focus only on Central America for a short moment here. So we're zooming in on the region of Central America, and we can see here that this number that we see, 27.8 on Costa Rica and 25 on Panama, this is basically not the starters only. This takes into account every single player in the league, and you get an average number of that. So how old are the players on average if you just bundle them up? And here we see that Costa Rica is actually the oldest league in all Central America, and Panama is the youngest league in Central America. And we'll see that Panama is not only the youngest, they're quite significantly the youngest. And what I want to show with this is that this is mainly a philosophy here that Panama is kind of adapting. I know you have said to me before that their league is not that competitive. So the strategic reasons of why they are that young is probably more sophisticated, and we will look into that. So the next slide will show what does Panama gain from having this approach compared to the opposites. And Panama, in their, let's say, youth national teams, they're actually gaining some significant results because of this philosophy. You can see that their under 20 generation is reaching the semifinals of this year's CONCACAF Championship. The under 23 won this tournament, the Maurice Revello tournament, where some significant teams are also participating. That was in just a year ago. And also their senior national team, while they might not be that young, they are actually quite successful in this moment. And they were the only Central American team that actually qualified, for example, from the Copa America. So on a national level, they're doing good. On a league level, they're less competitive. But I would argue that it's the league level which is the reason for these under 20, under 23 generations to be shining in these contexts. And I want to take this example back to Europe now, because we have small nations in Europe as well. As we can see, one of them is Slovenia here. Slovenia is a country with less than 2 million people, and they have a very, very powerful under 21 generation right now. As you can see here on the slide, they just qualified for the Euro by finishing number one in the group, ahead of France, ahead of Austria, which are significantly bigger football nations. And I'm very much impressed with this kind of achievements from small nations, because they are beating the bigger nations by a different strategy, a different philosophy here. So they are, of course, weaker than France when it comes to finances, infrastructure, coaching, education, player quality as well, really, if we're honest. But they have somehow managed to prepare the younger players better so that they can compete with these bigger nations. And if you remember from the very first slide, Slovenia was the youngest league in all of world football. So it means that their youngest players here, the players in their under 21 generations, they already have several seasons of experience playing senior football. And you might say that the Slovenian league is not that competitive, but they do have teams in Conference League and occasionally in Europa League as well. So these young players have been educated and actually played some European matches and played very competitive football for a while. So when they are facing against France or Austria, they're not that nervous about it, because they have played against men before, if you can put it that way, and then when they're playing against similar boys' age, it's going not to be that big of a difference. And those bullets here are just some other facts, that half of their squad is actually playing still in their domestic league. And yeah, they are the youngest league. But we can also look at another nation, which is not really a football nation. That is Finland. Finland, where ice hockey is the biggest sport normally. So football is not really that popular, but still we're seeing now that Finland are taking some big steps when it comes to youth football. For example, they're finishing second in the under 21 Euro group. Now they face a very difficult Norwegian team in who takes the last spot to Euro, but still Finland to be competing this deep into maybe qualifying, that is really impressive. You can see the under 19 generation as well here, making it to the second phase for the qualification here. So they're doing this similar approach to Slovenia. Many of the players have already played in the Finnish league. They're getting significant minutes in the Finnish league. So the Finnish league really don't start a lot of, let's say, older players, if we're staying on the topic. And that has allowed them to educate their players on a senior level, really. And with that, they have gotten some kind of, let's say, other values that you cannot put on paper. I mean, a young player who are getting this kind of senior experience, they get to play in front of supporters, they get the pressure, they get to handle media, they get to handle, the whole package of what football is. So that's what allows these smaller nations to compete with much more advanced football nations. That is very clear. One nation which I have not included here is Uzbekistan in Asia. And they are also the youngest league in Asia, and they are also getting significant results on this youth level. So this pattern is very directly correlated. There's no question about that. Then, but we go to the senior national team level here, and we're seeing that Costa Rica, again, if we're zooming into Costa Rica and the Central American region, then Costa Rica is the youngest national team in the whole region. So you have the oldest league, but you have the youngest national team. So that is kind of an interesting fact here. And Panama, who we just said were the youngest league, they have one of the oldest national teams. But if I were Panama in this case, I wouldn't be worried that you have like a more of an older generation, because evidently you have talented generations who will fill that gap naturally. So no stress if you're from Panama and watching this. But if you are Costa Rican and watching this, I want to ask you, Kari, what do you feel when you see this, that you're the youngest national team? Are you happy about it? Is it a certain pride associated to it, or is it a worry that you don't have that experience to lean on?
Well, actually, I have one word for this, and the word is process. So what I understand is that Panama, they have a higher average level on the national team, but that's why they're investing. They're making this process for the younger generations, and that process is not happening in Costa Rica for maybe the last decade. So it has to be forced, because you're taking the last data of the national team, but let's remember that this new younger players in the national team was a forced change, which happened just a couple of months ago. So I think the data was quite related to the local league the last couple of years, which was actually one of my main worried points. And I would say without a doubt that they were actually even worse or in a higher average than Honduras. So I honestly don't like this forced and pushed changes as Costa Rica just did. So yeah, I think that's the word.
I would say that the result of now you have an exciting national team from the outside perspective. When I look at Costa Rica, I think, wow, there are many young players who are actually playing in Europe nowadays. There's the Alcocer, there's Zamora, there's Aguilera, there's Warren now. But I don't think they are a result of the Costa Rican league systematically developing them. They are just kind of like they happen to have that moment in the league, and then they took off to Europe and have done quite well there. So I wouldn't fully credit the Costa Rican league for this achievement yet. It's more like it happened, let's enjoy it. And like you said, it's a little bit forced now. Because I remember a time where they weren't selected in the national team under Suarez, the coach, right? So who knows what would have happened if that coach change didn't happen? Would Costa Rica still top this list? We don't know that. But for now, you can take pride in the youngest league in the region. Looks exciting and looks like the future is bright. But it's about how can we foster this culture that this naturally happens and it does not become forced again, or that you get into the stage of basically where you were before. And that's my view on it. But we'll proceed here with some slides. And if we go back to the Costa Rican league now, and we're zooming back into the average age on the pitch in the Costa Rican league, which was quite high, 28.6. I want to highlight a couple of matches here to show you the reasons why it is so high, really. So the first one there is Saprissa against Antigua. It's a game which happened earlier this month, where Saprissa fielded an average age of their lineup here of 31.4, as you will see here on the yellow highlighted. That is significant. And that would top most charts in even European football. And I want to compare it here with, basically it's like an input from you here, Kari, but you used this game as kind of a reference, Saprissa against Liverpool in 2005, so basically 20 years ago, where the average age of Saprissa in that match was 27.5. So since then, Saprissa has become they've actually increased their average age. But the question is, have they become more successful than that or not? As a result of investing in a little bit more older squads for stability, perhaps, or for performance, perhaps. That's an open-ended question. We don't know the answers here. It's all up for interpretation. But if we look outside of Saprissa, if we actually look at the other teams, there was a match play yesterday, Guanacaste against Liberia, and we'll see that Guanacaste actually had a 31 years of age lineup, and Liberia almost 30 years here, so 29.5. And I want to ask you, as a resident in the country, following the football there, sometimes live, what do you feel when you watch the matches? Are you feeling that there's a lack of youth, there's a lack of excitement because there are few young players to target when you see a match between two average ages like this? Is that a problem for the spectators?
Yes, I think it's frustrating. And it also gives us false data because sometimes we see young players like coming up, like at least one per squad, and we see them kind of being good on a local level. But then you don't know if they're good because they're just outplaying older guys who are not in good shape and who are slower and I mean, not better on reaction and on simple football basics. So you actually can't measure if they're actually good talents or not. And they go abroad, and some of them, after a couple of months, they even return in a worse shape. And those are the talents that we are wasting, or players that we are wasting. So this could actually first fool you when you're trying to find new players in the league. And secondly, it's frustrating because you're seeing the same gang of the same player just changing the shirt year after year. And I think most probably the players we have right now, and especially in Guanacaste, Liberia, and Santana, and other projects, they're all recycled players
Mm.
who have played in the 3, 4 different teams in the local league. So it's like seeing the same guys just running around. I love football, but
Yeah.
it becomes frustrating.
My problem, having watched many Costa Rican games from Europe, is that my perspective is that when the young players are given a chance, it is often in an unfair context. It can be that a big team has an important game in the future in 2, 3 days time, and today they're playing against Santos, for example, or Perez, or whichever team in the league, and now they have to rotate, right? So they have to change whole of the lineup, and they're including some young players there. And most likely they will drop points because there are too many changes. So they drop points. And what happens when you drop points? The fans get angry. The media gets frustrated, or the media is writing that, look how bad they dropped points, right? And finger pointing starting. The finger pointing is the young players didn't take the chance, right? The young players costed us the points. We did too many changes. That for me is not giving the chance, okay? That for me is throwing the young players straight to failure, and they're misjudged from the very beginning. Giving the chance means to give the chance consistently in the right context when the full team is available to assist them and help them, kind of naturally integrate in the team. That is given the chance to young players. So that is my kind of eyes and opinion on how the Costa Rican teams tend to play their youth. I also have a second opinion. We know Crechel Perez now, plays in Alajuela now, does well, but the only reason he's doing well is because he did a good season with Perez. And I'm thinking, why couldn't he get that chance last year in Alajuela? Why Perez must make that happen? You know, is it because Alajuela could not give him that chance? And in that case, why couldn't they? Is it just an excuse, or is it really they couldn't because they had someone 10 times better at that position at that time? Again, I think you could have had the same development that he's seeing now, but 1 year earlier, is my opinion. Okay. But you see, now they are still getting the rewards from developing him, but actually, I don't think they can take full credit of that. So that's my 2 cents to this conversation. But let's move on to the next slide. And here is more comparing the two opposites, if you will. So you see the Costa Rican league and the teams and their respective age, so oldest to youngest. And you see the Slovenian, so the European, very young European league. And you will just see here one quick observation is that the oldest team in Slovenia would be the youngest team in Costa Rica. That's what all I want to show here, and just to show the different philosophies here. And there are some good teams here who are actually playing Europe. Celia plays in Europe, Olympia plays in Europe with these young teams. And I'm going to say Europe, I mean European competitions. So you cannot play the league is low quality card really, because they are actually competitive in a European level, at least enough competitive. All that word is always up for interpretation always, so I want to be careful with that. But we proceed with some general questions here, just 3 from me that I want us to think about, and we can discuss around them. So is Costa Rican club football more important than national team success? And just an open question as well, should teams in the league do more for young players? And think a little bit of the risks of what happens if you don't focus on young players and you only build around experience to get results right here, right now. That's okay to build like that, but what is then the consequence of doing that? Do you have any immediate answers to those, Katri?
Yes, I do actually. The consequences, we are living them. The consequences that then you need to push the generational changes on the national level. And the youth national teams of Costa Rica have not been in bigger tournaments. They're not participating as they used to. And that reflects the results of the national team. Of course, now it's kind of changing, and we have a little bit of a fate on this new boys, as you said before. But this is the why we needed to get to this point in which we are against the wall, right? And the other consequence we're seeing, and this may be mostly related on your first question there, is that many people here, and it's gonna be surprising for you, but they prefer their local teams instead of the national team. So what happens there? There are two ways to go. So the local team first competes in the local level and competes on an international level. So the importance of European clubs to play in Conference Europa and Champions League is quite different from what you perceive from teams on this area. So most of the fans they could even tell you, and it's gonna be shocking, that they prefer to win the local league than winning something on international level. And for example, having these experienced players in Costa Rica, as it is an experienced league and it has like older boys everywhere, they can compete because they're in similar conditions. But once they go on international level, and you can notice by yourself by checking the results in the last 10 years, all Costa Rican clubs, well, on Central American level, they still compete because they still have some kind of authority and better conditions and some certain like additional facts that help them. But once they have to play against Mexico and North American teams, including Canada, by the way, um, or teams from MLS, even if they're out of their season, I mean, it's crazy, but they can't compete. They lose 5-0, 6-0. The difference is it's incredible. It's shocking. So that's something that kind of orienting towards these experienced players has given to Costa Rican football, and it's international failure. And it's not only on the national team level; it's on clubs level. So yeah, definitely, kind of landing on your second question, um, there must be a change in the. I would say there must be this change in the local league youth 21 law, and we should increase the time requested for each team. And the ban not shouldn't be just financial. The ban should be like, listen, if you don't fulfill this request, you're going to the second division. So then they will try to build processes and they try to like put in the younger players not only when they're rotating the squad, but they will try to find a way to fit them into their like standard projects. I think that's the only way.
Yes, I would think that there might be some fans of teams watching and thinking, well, we don't have talented players anymore. We had Warren, for example, and he was special, but there are not 10 of them that we can just find week to week, right? So then the question is, why don't you find a way of integrating what you have? Because you have an infrastructure, you have an academy, you must find a natural pathway of them of reaching. And if you don't do that, then you must look internally. Okay, what are we doing wrong? Why aren't we getting more players into our main team? I'm not saying they must be dominant in that team. They must just be able to fill a particular role, so that the team performance doesn't really suffer that much. Because I guarantee you, there are many talented players out there who would 10 games in look very different than they would the first game when they're judged from the beginning. And that's my problem sometimes with coaches and their philosophies, that some coaches are very much pro experience and some are, of course, different in their philosophy. But I see more often than not this kind of connection between experience. I use experience as the word instead of saying old. It just sounds better, right? I use experience to get results right now. Okay, but if you look at the facts, I don't want to be harsh on Saprissa now. Okay, so don't take me wrong. I've been to the stadium; it's fantastic atmosphere. So I'm only using them example because they're a big team in the country. But now, when you got knocked out by Antigua, for example, with an old team, so that experienced team could not take you to the next level. The cost of that has been that the young players have suffered because they didn't get the chance, and anyway, the team didn't get the goals. The goal was not achieved of qualifying, despite putting all the effort into, I'm going to feel the most trustworthy squad I have. And that still was not enough. So what I want to say is that the cost of that is that you have just wasted a season on the youth football there. That's my view on it. So that's the cost. But other than that, I think Costa Rica generally, you have the biggest football tradition in Central America if you compare to the list I showed before. So there's There's no need to top this unflattering lists of age. You have the good football tradition, you have better conditions than most comparable nations in your nearby region. So why not use it to your advantage to be even more on the front foot when you can? There's no outside threat. Okay, the only one doing slightly things a bit different is Panama. They're getting success on the, as we saw before, on the under 20 generations and 23. They're competitive. They're competing with the US generations. They're competing with Mexico. Okay, but they're not competing with their domestic league teams in the competitions. So they have chosen that trade-off. Okay, but I think Costa Rica can do both if they just find that balance. You don't have to give up one to be good in another, but you can find a better balance that you don't have to suffer in one direction or sometimes both directions because one season goes wrong. So that's just my final thought is that Costa Rica should use their football tradition, their big teams in a better way so that you can shape the future. And this needs to start from the big teams, setting the example, because you cannot reverse into the future by trusting the same guys year after year after year just to win the league. And then sometimes you go far in the tournaments, on the international tournaments, but sometimes you also fail, like this year happened. No one would expect that it's a success being knocked out by a Guatemalan team, right? Generally speaking here. So find that better balance, and that's all I want Costa Rica to do, really, from my perspective when I see it. Because, like I said, topping these lists is typically not a flattering thing. It's not a disaster, but it just shows there's room for improvement.
It's a lot of room for improvement. And I know that you already shared your final remarks, Emir, but I want to give you maybe a minute so you can also send a small message to everybody who's watching this video. They're going to be mostly Costa Ricans, and I do believe some of them will agree, some others will disagree. And by the way, before I give you the open mic, I want to invite everybody to comment on the comment section. If you have any additional inputs which we could consider for this topic, you can just go ahead and share them with us, and we'll consider for the next episode. If there's a 2.0 to see how everything advances. So yeah, whatever you want to share, my brother.
No, I'm just thinking, I'm sitting here with the shirt on. Obviously, I'm showing my loyalties a little bit too clearly, perhaps. But yes, I'm one of the few people in Europe actually trying to watch and follow the Costa Rican League. And all I'm saying here is not made up by me. This data, it's official data out there for anyone to take part of. So I guess the reason of my comments is that it's all in goodwill, right? It's all in the context of I want things to improve so that you continue to be competitive and still going strong. And I will be there attending some matches when I can, and hopefully see the development and see some more interesting players coming through as it has partly in the past years. But like I said, more. Let's aim to get younger. Don't we all want to become a bit younger? So that's my final remarks, I guess.
Quite a dream to become younger. Well, we'll try. We'll try. Emir, thank you very much for this investigation and for sharing your comments with us. I do believe it's going to be quite enlightening for everybody. And I keep it open for maybe next episodes to follow up and to see how things improve. I hope they will. So maybe we can also have a live episode from a stadium or after or before a game. So let's see what happens in the
Absolutely.
future. So that being said, thank you all for joining, and see you soon. Pura vida.